Thank you very much, Abdul Salam, for that backgrounder. We have three guests, regulars on Good Morning Nigeria, in discussing economic and financial matters. Professor Uche Waleke, Chairman, Chartered Institute of Bankers, Abuja Chapter, former Commissioner for Finance, and also Professor of Capital Markets at Nasarawa State University, Kefi. Pleasure to have you this morning, Uche.
Yeah, thank you, Kinsley. Good morning, Nigerians.
Financial and investment analyst, Neya Kinseju, delight to welcome you to this edition of the program.
My pleasure as always. Good morning, Nigeria.
Okay.
We also have Shuaibu Idris. Shuaibu Idris is the Managing Director, Timeline Consult Limited. He joins the conversation from our studio in Lagos. Good morning and welcome to the program.
Good morning, Kirian. Good morning, Kinsley. And good morning, our fellow discussant. Good morning, Nigerians, and thanks for having me.
All right, gentlemen, once again, we welcome you to the program, and just a couple of days to Christmas, the Chamber, the House of Representatives, has passed the appropriation bill, awaiting, of course, the passage by the Senate, which ought to have considered it yesterday, but apparently deferred it on account of their consideration of the President's veto of the Electoral Act Amendment Bill. Professor Uche Waleke, what do you make of this development? Are you seeing the Senate also agreeing with the House, or we are likely to have some dissonance, and therefore we call for further conferencing there before you have a harmonized version?
Yeah, thanks once again, Kinsley. The first thing to note is to commend the House of Reps for ensuring that the appropriation bill is passed, because it is critical that the bill is passed this year, before the end of the year, so that the budget can kick in, the implementation can kick in good time. Of course, we also know that the 2021 budget implementation, from what we have read, has been extended, by 90 days. But it's important that the 2020 budget is ready. So I also expect the Senate to, do same to pass the appropriation bill, so that the President can assent and implementation will commence in earnest. But having said that, I also want to note that what the House of Reps passed is not exactly what the executive arm submitted. The House of Reps tinkered with what was submitted, especially the revenue projections. You recall that the executive arm had submitted an appropriation bill which was based on certain benchmarks and assumptions, one of which is the oil price benchmark, which was then put at $57 per barrel. And that's of course in line with the medium-term expenditure framework, the 2020-2024 medium-term expenditure framework, which has $57 per barrel for 2022, the same $57 per barrel for 2023, and $55 per barrel for 2024. So the 2021 22 appropriation bill has been predicated on that medium-term expenditure framework that has oil price benchmark as $57 per barrel. But in passing the bill, the House jacked it up from $57 per barrel to $62 per barrel. So a $5 increase resulting in an increase in the size of the expenditure estimate from 16.3 trillion naira to now 17.1 trillion naira. So my take here is that I would have preferred a situation in which the House of Reps had maintained the $57 per barrel oil price benchmark. Of course, the other parameters were left unchanged. Talking about the oil output, talking about the exchange rate, 410 15 cents, per naira. Talking about inflation target of 13% and GDP growth rate of 4.2%. Those were left unchanged. But the main thing that was tinkered with had to do with the oil price benchmark. And in that regard, I would have preferred a situation in which that was left unchanged, because when you lean your budget more on projections from oil, you make your budget, vulnerable to, a lot of risk. You increase the budget risk, because as we know, this is one area that is highly volatile. This is one area over which we have, little or no control. Yes, it's quite tempting and persuasive to say, given the average performance of the oil price in 2021, that it makes sense to use $62 per barrel. Of course, doing so would mean more money for the federal government, more money for even the subnationals, for the states and local government. But again, from experience, we know that usually the trend, the uptrend in the oil price it doesn't usually reflect the outlook for the coming year. Okay, we've had that experience over time. So I had thought that should have also influenced the passage of this bill. You can still recall that in 2017, just a difference of $2 per barrel from 42.5 dollars to 44 that the National Assembly did, caused a lot of issues, and that delayed the assent by the president. So this time we're having $5 per barrel, per barrel. So I also hope that it doesn't, cause some, acrimony between the two arms and, leading to delay in the budget. So the point I want to make this morning is that the idea of increasing the oil price benchmark is not, in my view, is not a wise one for a country, that is, leaning much on oil revenue to finance the budget. And that has also meant, if going by what they passed, even the budget deficit has been increased from 6.2 trillion, to the increase is 98 billion. So you are increasing the budget deficit. It also means that the financing component, the debt component, to finance it will also be higher.
All right, let's hear from Neo Akinsuju with respect to the budget that has been passed by the House of Reps. Of course, Professor Waleke has pointed the fact that there's increase in oil price benchmark by the House. Are you expecting, what are you expecting the Senate to do in this regard?
I think it's most likely the Senate will also align with what the House of Reps have done. It's tempting, especially when you look, when you consider the fact of critical infrastructural needs, and that had been the explanation all this while, and the specific explanation for this increase, in the 2022 bill as passed by the House of Reps. I first want to congratulate the National Assembly as a whole for this focused effort to pass the budget 22 in December. Now we are seeing the institutionalization of the January to December cycle, and I think there's also a convergence of sorts between the federal fiscal budgeting system and the subnational fiscal budgeting system. You will see a copycat template, as it were, because over the last 2 years that this January to December cycle, has been emplaced, most subnationals had also keyed into it. So the Nigerian, that tells us about the nature of the Nigerian federal system, that the subnational would naturally trend towards what the federal government is doing, and it helps the economic space because one, it helps projection, and of course it also helps the efforts at stimulating the economy when expenditure is being spent at the same time, more or less. Then you also don't forget that about 67 to 80% of listed companies also have their cycle within the January to December cycle too. So you see, That convergence as a whole. So I think it's good, the trend that we're seeing, and I hope the Senate would also do the needful. I see the Senate following the House of Reps, increasing the benchmark. Why this had been done, to my mind, is because the OPEC had also been very active in terms of projection, making public their projection. Virtually every other day, you see the OPEC Plus projections in terms of projection for demands in the current week, in the current month, and even beyond. I have also seen critical international analysts, Goldman Sachs and all that, also coming up with positive projections on global demand threshold. So, and I'm sorry, I am also aligned, with that, because the truth is that either we like it or not, we are dependent on crude oil sales. Our more than 80% of our exports is still crude oil dependent. Our earning is still crude oil dependent. I think we still have, there's a need for us to optimize, whatever we can earn, from crude oil. Thankfully, our rig heads are returning. From a high of 22 or so in 2019, it fell to about four, in 2020. Now it's coming up to about 7. By now. So going forward, I think we should be able to meet up the 1.88. At a point in time, I think about 2 or 3 months ago, it went to as low as 1.2 million barrels a day. And that was scandalously low for a country that's dependent on crude oil. So going forward, I think we should be able to meet that 1.88 and even more. Even if we are, the target should be to get our rig heads operational to about 20. We should be able to do close to 2 million then. I also believe that we can do that 62. Oil had been trending at an average $70 per barrel in the last two months, and there are projections that it won't fall even to $65 through 2022. So if that is the case, let us have, rather than have it go into the excess crude account, where all manners of discretionary, measures would have to be applied. Let us have clear projections on what we are expecting, and how we want to spend going forward. But I am not comfortable with the added deficits. I think there are concerns, obviously, on the debting and all that, to also now add that $98 billion. Billion naira. I think it's getting too ambitious, But again, the budget as it is telling me that the government priorities are being taken care of. Area of roads construction, you see about 470 billion naira allocated capital to works and housing, 285 billion allocated to agriculture, 204 billion to defense. Those are the top 3 allocated entities, ministries, in terms of capital. So it tells me, okay, that's the area the government is interested in. But the truth of the matter is, our the capital budgetary allocation are still very, very low, Well, perhaps we are being creative about it by all these other interventions, intervention entities, the Infraco that is upcoming, the NSIA, the Nigerian Sovereign Insurance, investment authorities and all that. I hope that we would be able to get this driving the economy, because the budget size is still low. That's still my consideration here.
All right, Neil, thank you very much. Shuaibu Idris, let's also get your opening salvo on this issue.
Kingsley, thank you, fellow discussant. I beg to differ in some of the positions my professional colleagues have taken. Number one, I feel the National Assembly, and in particular the House of Representatives, shouldn't have increased the benchmark or the assumption on the crude oil price from 57 to 62. The medium expenditure framework that was approved by the same National Assembly after being submitted by the executives did think about the potentials of the demand and supply of oil before we agreed at 57. So I feel it is a bit of an exuberance. Just 1 year after approval of the MTEP to increase the benchmark price from 57 to $62. I think number two is, despite the increase, what we expected was, if anything, you increase the benchmark oil price, which is the major revenue source of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. We should have seen a reduction in the deficit, or we should have seen an avenue of repayment of debt. We didn't see that. Instead, even the deficit has been increased by additional $98 billion, billion naira rather. I mean, this is the figures are not adding up. Lastly, on the issue of increase in the benchmark, is we need to be saving for the rainy day. And I repeat, this nation and those of us alive today needs to be saving for our children and children or grandchildren yet unborn. We make money and we spend, and we are spending not just for our own time, but the future of our children. If we are not saving, if we don't accrue into the excess accrued account or the NSIA, the National Sovereign Investment Wealth Authority, if we don't save, when there are shocks, where do we run to? I'm also surprised that the appropriation bill passed by the House of Representatives did not appear to take into cognizance the finance bill that was first presented prior to the appropriation bill. And the House of Representatives did consider that finance bill. The finance bill has several, features, particularly areas where revenues are being considered, and they are likely going to be implemented. The Minister of Finance, Honorable Minister of Finance, did inform Nigerians that breast up come 2022, you will pay a little more tax so that, our debt to revenue can reduce and we can get even more money into the kitties of government, and then we give you the dividends of democracy. So what I personally expect to see and to be seen in future budgets, fundamentally, number one, what savings are we making as regards expenditure? Kinsley, Kirian, fellow discussant, in the last 5-6 years that I've been associated with this program, we've always been talking about recurrent expenditure too high, What is the executive doing to reduce the recurrent expenditure? What is the National Assembly doing to help and ensure that recurrent expenditure is significantly reduced? It is important that in budgeting, we should have a section of the income that we are using to fund the budget to come from savings, belt tightening, austerity measure. We can't continue to run life as if it is business as usual. This is business unusual. This country deserves better mechanism of governance, better mechanism of spending, as opposed to what we are doing. Secondly, we also need to take a critical look at our debt. It is increasing, getting higher. The international financial system is gradually coming to terms with the reality of the situation. The US, continental Europe are likely going to increase interest rate. Once interest rates are increased, our debt servicing obligation will also increase. I'm sorry, I have to differ with the House of Representatives again and the executive on the issue of exchange rate. The Naira today on the parallel market is trading in excess of 530, 550 Naira. We're still holding the official exchange rate at 410 Naira. What that posits is rent seeking is continuing in the economy. The central bank and indeed the executive needs to come to terms with the reality that there may be a need to devalue the currency. It is a bitter pill. I know it is not normal that executives will come to say we will devalue, but when you are ill and you have to take drugs, you better take the drugs so that you get well. The naira might end up around 600, 610 naira by the end of 2022, and we are still holding our budget assumption at 410 naira. I think that aspect needs to be looked at. Finally, Kingsley and Kirian, I believe the National Assembly and the Executive are not being realistic with an oil output of daily production of 1.88. Investment has not been coming into that sector. You know, we have several challenges. We've been producing, as Nia has said, at 1.2 million barrels a day. And we are now, planning to say, come January 1, in the next 2 weeks, we will be producing 1.88 million barrels per day. It's like telling you, I, Shoaibu, that has never flown a plane, I will pilot a plane in the next 24 hours. Let's be realistic. Let's test ourselves the bitter truth. We probably should have interjected and said the daily production should be somewhere around 1.5, 1.6 million barrels a day, as opposed to the humongous figure of 1.88 million. And in the last 3 years or 4 years, there has never been 1 year where or when we were able to meet our daily oil production. And I have always said this whenever we have this conversation, we need to take that into consideration.
Well, all right, thank you. He has actually touched in the real mechanics, of budgeting and assumptions. But the major is the aspect of revenue projections in this country, which always hinged on the what is expected to accrue from the oil sector. Now, the House of Reps jacked it up to $62 per barrel. Presently, it is at 57. What is the implication of this, Prof?
Yeah, the implication is obvious. Obvious in the sense that the 3 tiers of government will be expecting more revenue. And before now, a number of states, have done their budgets, based on the original projections. That's $57 per barrel. So these states will also now be expecting more if they are to revise their estimates, based on 62, dollars per barrel. But let me also say, perhaps for emphasis, that yes, we may have, or the National Assembly may have looked at projections by international energy agencies, such as the one by the Energy Information Administration, the US EIA, the World Bank, including rating services. But you also recall that in 2014, for example, none of these agencies, foresaw the sudden crash in oil price, from over $100 per barrel to at some point $30-something per barrel. None of them saw that coming. We also had that experience even during in 2020 as a result of COVID. Now we have a major threat, facing the global economy, which is the Omicron, variant. Nobody knows, how it's going to turn out in 2022, and it was even against that backdrop that the IMF, had to revise, their growth projections for the world, GDP growth projections for the world from 6% to 4.4% in 6% for 2021, and then down to 4.4% for 2022. So if you now look at these possible risks, global risks and economic headwinds, you wouldn't be too optimistic when you are, making your estimate for 2022. So I still strongly think that the National Assembly, should have allowed that $57 per barrel, okay? Because in the first instance, that is what is contained in the medium-term expenditure framework that has already been passed. So if we are looking at shoring up revenue, we should be looking at the non-oil sector. It's a good thing, and I also want to commend this administration for the practice of always accompanying the budget or the appropriation bill with the finance bill. Okay, the House of Reps equally considered the finance bill of 2021. That also has some measures to shore up revenue. In the appropriation, in the 2022 budget proposal, the government, made it clear some of the initiatives it intends to use in 2022 to shore up revenue under the strategic and revenue, growth initiatives. Okay, one of which is to ensure, tax compliance. The other also to, ensure some expenditure control, as well as ensure that MDAs also remit their surpluses, to the federal government. So we should be looking at the non-oil side if we must increase revenue. The federal government has a plan to, move our revenue to GDP from 6 to 8% to 15%, in a very short while. So that's not talking about oil revenue, because oil revenue is highly volatile. So I don't subscribe to the idea of increasing benchmark oil price, because anything can happen. And it also makes sense to begin to effect spending cuts in the middle of a possible drop, in oil price. We have a provision for supplementary budget. So even if oil price increases to, by more than what is planned, is it not in the benefit, to our benefit? The money will still come to the Federation. Whether you keep it in excess crude account also belongs to the Federation. And as has been canvassed here, it's important we create a fiscal buffer. Okay, it's also important we see how we can use additional revenue to reduce the budget deficit, because debt is growing. Kinsley, I want to make a point here. The point I want to make is more of a question. I've been wondering, Kinsley, you're a lawyer. Maybe you can also help to answer the question. Yes. Section 11 of the Fiscal Responsibility Act, Section 11, yes, of the FIF, Fiscal Responsibility Act of 2007, now talks about the power of the National Assembly with respect to the medium-term expenditure framework. We don't have that in the Constitution. The Constitution, Section 81 of the Constitution says the President, is expected to lay before the National Assembly, the estimates of revenue and expenditure at any time before the end of the year. The Fiscal Responsibility Act, goes on to say that the medium-term expenditure framework should be laid before them at least 4 months before the end of which the government has been doing. But what that Section 11 is saying is that the National Assembly has the power to amend the medium-term expenditure framework, okay, as it deems, if it deems fit. So that amendment, does it mean that they have the power to jack up what has been submitted, or to make amendment within the envelope that has been submitted? In other words, the President submits 16.3 trillion. The amendment, shouldn't it be within that size of the envelope, rather than saying you want to, you have the power to jack it up? And that is why I've always said that we need a budget law in this country, rather than the pieces of legislation here and there, that we often cite to support the budget. We need a budget law that will codify these things and, take away some of these, controversies, so that tomorrow, when this appropriation bill, when this, that has been passed gets to the President, okay, he doesn't say no, and then we'll begin to count 30 days again, okay, within which the National Assembly will be talking about overriding, okay. So, and of course, that will delay budget implementation. So, in sum, I'm saying that I'm commending the National Assembly, House of Reps for doing what they have done, but the idea of increasing the oil price benchmark should be revisited. The Senate should also, look at it and possibly come back within what has been, stated in the medium-term expenditure framework.
Well, Professor Uche Waloke, you said you were going to ask me a question, but I was waiting for the question, yes, so that I become a guest. I mean, in the meantime, but I think the point you're making is framed around the controversy that we've had, more particularly in the Fourth Republic, that's since 1999, as to the role of the legislature in dealing with the appropriation bill tabled by the executive branch, whether at the state level or at the federal level. And the controversy had been hot at some point to say that, look, the Constitution does not envisage a rubber stamp legislature. To say, you have given us this, you have all the parameters, all we need to do, you have tied our hands, then we have to walk around this. But that where the legislature feels that there ought to be amendments, either by way of increase or by way of decrease, that's what amendment means. Then you could, of course, do that. But the way out of it, out of the controversy, had been increased interaction between the executive branch and the legislature, even before the bill is presented.
Absolutely.
So we have seen that happen during the President Muhammadu Buhari administration increasingly, so that it is not in the open that controversies blow up, and then everybody is wondering, say, why did you do this or why didn't you do that? But the key points that, gentlemen, you have raised about the oil benchmark would be symptomatic, if you like, of a key issue that we also need to address. Because when you look at the principal pieces of legislation that should govern public financial management, including the appropriation bill, for instance, which then becomes an act, one of the most important pieces of legislation that the legislature can pass. Take it this way: we don't have the NDP yet as a piece of legislation. NDP being the National Development Plan, but that is the umbrella. Then you now have the FRA, which is the Fiscal Responsibility Act. There are key provisions there. From that, you have the MTEF. From MTEF, you now have the appropriation bill itself. And then from the appropriation bill, you have the finance bill, which now also becomes a finance act when passed. The finance bill is to enable the fuller implementation of the appropriation act.
Yes.
And the question has been raised in the course of this conversation that there appears to be no fuller attention to the provisions of these other pieces of legislation, like the finance bill, for instance, or finance act, if it comes out, and then the MTEF. What is happening, let me ask you, Niyi, to the legislature? Is it blindsided by some of these other extant provisions, or that it just takes the appropriation bill as a sole piece of legislation without full recourse to what is intended in the other supportive, if you like, pieces of legislation?
I think blindsided would better describe the situation we're looking at, because it's supposed to be a global thing. When you're looking at the appropriation bill, you are supposed to link it with all possible principal legislation, that has to do with fiscal management, finance and fiscal management. The Finance Bill 2021, as it were, has opened up, not increased, because I understand, by my understanding of the bill, there is no increase in rates. It's just a wider coverage of rates. A wider coverage of taxes, and I think which is appropriate at this point in time. And there's a need, for the. I would have expected, and I was looking for such, input, in the passage by the House of Reps, where we'll see defined increase in non-oil sector. I know specifically that the financial bill and the Finance Bill 2021 speaks to taxing, gaming, gambling, and all that. That is one segment of the economy that had not been brought formally into the fiscal net. So I would have expected a kind of projection that from these segments of the economy, and it has become broad, really. It covers corporate promotions, bettings, casinos, and all that. So even as a layman in that sub-industry, I could project some 20, 30 billion naira coming from there. So I think that could have been added. If that had been added to what we are talking about, we would have been reducing the 98 billion new deficit, by some $30 billion naira, And then, of course, if we look at other segments that are highlighted in the Finance Bill 2021, perhaps they wouldn't be talking of the 98 billion naira. That for me is out of it. It should actually be revisited. But I am all for this increase, I feel that it can be accommodated. The $5 increase in the benchmark, I think it can be accommodated, and I think that from the word go, it's good that we have a clear vision of what the bill or the act, when it becomes an act, will be able to deliver in the next 12 months in that cycle. But perhaps if the National Assembly is hearing us now, the appeal will be that 98 billion naira, there should be some other imputation driven by the finance bill, as it were. The House of Reps had also passed it together with the bill, with the appropriation bill. Let us key into those provisions, as it were, and see how new revenues can be earned, and then of course add to what is on ground, remove that 98 billion. It's not even exactly sensitive at this point in time.
Well, gentlemen, it does appear that this budget did not take a cognizance of the non-oil sector, as NI highlighted a short while ago. Because I was wondering all through the budget, I did not see the non-oil sector playing a role in terms of what could be accruable to the nation's revenue base, as to provide some level of assistance to the oil sector, which everybody is clamoring for. Let's bring in our man Shaibu Idris once more. You have listened to both Professor Waleke and Nii on this very issue, and Kingsley also raised the issue of a piece of legislation that should be supportive, to the appropriation bill itself, which perhaps were highly ignored, this time around. Now, can we really achieve a realistic budget based on what we have seen today? This House of Reps budget has been passed. We're expecting Senate to also look at it. What would you be expecting from the Senate? Would there be a reconsideration of those pieces of legislation that were ignored, and of course the non-oil sector, with respect to, of course, the 98 billion budget deficit that we had of yesterday?
Kiran, thank you once again for that question. Number one, I think it will be wrong for us to think that the House of Reps didn't take into consideration the non-oil sector. The income from, say, custom duties or federal inland revenue service, stamp duties, and other, surcharges that are being collected, like, say, by Corporate Affairs Commission and other revenue-generating agencies. Of course, the budget did take into that, because when you look at 17 trillion naira expenditure, all the monies isn't coming from the oil sector. So yes, there are considerations. Were they glozing over, some of those? Maybe yes, maybe no. However, what I think and what I will suggest to the members of the National Assembly, both House of Representatives and the Senate, is to endeavor to use the resources given to them to hire professionals to help them to review documents coming to them prior to taking action. There has been a talk on the need to remove subsidy, both oil or petroleum product subsidy and electricity subsidy, and the need to possibly introduce toll gates on our highways so that revenues can accrue. I will want to see a budget that is hinged and talking along those areas, so that the level of wastage can significantly reduce. What are my expectations from the Senate? Gentlemen, if you look at say the statistics of members of the National Assembly, the lower chamber is supposed to be populated by people like me, who are younger generations and a little vibrant. The red chamber or the Senate is supposed to be populated by matured men and women who will, like the saying goes, the younger one wants to run like Bullet Ben Johnson, and the elders will say, hey, apply the brake. So I want to see a moderating outcome of this budget from the Red Chamber. Naturally, I would want to see a situation where the elders in the National Chamber should have a feel for the future generations of Nigerians. We should save, we should imbibe the culture of saving, we should imbibe the culture of reducing waste significantly. We are still a nation of profligate, personalities. Only yesterday or day before yesterday, Elon Musk, one of the richest men on planet Earth today, was reputed to say that he will be paying about $11 billion US dollars as tax. That is what 36 states of this nation, and indeed the federal government, would have collected in the last 5 years. Do we have Elon Musk types in Nigeria? The answer is yes. How much money are we collecting from them? Are we using or misusing, waivers, concessions, and other forms of, peerages that we give to our powerful men and women? I think the executive, the National Assembly, should help us. If indeed we want to run a democratic government, we want to be fair and sincere to this country and to the citizens, we need to endeavor to ensure that we insist people pay taxes. At the beginning of this conversation, we did allude to the fact that federal revenues budget is about 230 or 250 billion naira. Gentlemen, 250 billion naira by federal revenue to be spent on what and for what? So the wastage in various government agencies is humongous. And the earlier we work up and block some of those leakages and loopholes, the better for us.
Idris, thank you very much there for the points that you have raised, including having to close up the sources of the huge recurrent expenditure. Just before we take this break, gentlemen, I want us to also take a look at this, because when you view the overall appropriation bill as passed now by the House of Representatives and the dissonance that there is with some of the other aspects of either the finance bill or other things, there are some issues that will come up. One of them will be as follows. Some weeks ago, there was a lot of drama, if you may, about inviting cash cow agencies to come and defend their budget, because they said, the National Assembly members said that they never always had a full picture of what those cash cow agencies were doing. Central Bank, NNPC, and a couple of others we said, look, you must come and defend your budget, X, Y, Z. Now, the question would be, what emerged from those interactions? If what emerged from those interactions means that we could not still scrape off from whatever will be in their reserves or whatever they will be earning to boost our earnings, and therefore reduce either the debt burden or even the deficit overall, to say, look, we are going to have this one. If you are expecting more revenue from these cash cow agencies, about whom there was a lot of optics to say you must come, you must issue a statement here and there. How do you relate to that, Professor Uche Waleke?
Yeah, thank you, Kinsley. First is to note that I don't think I agree with the view that you have this disparity or wide disparity between the finance bill, the MTEF, the appropriation bill, and even the National Development Plan. I think the appropriation bill, 2022 appropriation bill, is a product of the medium-term expenditure framework, which is also why I'm arguing that since the medium-term expenditure framework has been approved by this same National Assembly, that should also mean that the appropriation bill, should be, passed with, little amendments, because increasing the oil price benchmark would be going contrary to what you had already passed, what is in the medium-term expenditure framework. So they're meant to be.
Disparity.
Yeah, no. Ordinarily, it flows from there.
That's right.
Every other thing was kept intact. All the targets, all the benchmarks, kept intact, except for that oil price benchmark, which is why I'm advising that they should return it the way it is. Before I get to your question, let me say something briefly on this issue of exchange rate, which was alluded to. Yes, if you look at the medium-term expenditure framework for 2022-2024. All through the 3 years, the government has used 410 naira 15 kobo to the dollar as the exchange rate. 410. Okay, people might say that's not realistic, but of course, when you are doing a budget, you wouldn't be using a rate that is outside of the prevailing official exchange rate, because if you do so, you are sending a signal that there's an intention to devalue the naira, and that can cause a lot of distortions, a lot of speculative activities, in the system. So I want to say that yes, they are very much in alignment, and it's important that that rate is maintained. Now, the issue of government independent revenue, if you look at the 2022 budget, the share of government independent revenue and what the government expects to get from, the government enterprises, is way higher than what we had in 2021. Okay, and that's perhaps on the assumption that more money will come in from, government enterprises, in line with the strategic, growth, revenue growth initiative, of the government, which is why I'm happy that unlike previously, some of these agencies of government, at least we are beginning to see their financials. Let's talking about, for example, the NMPC, that is beginning now to publish its financials. So it's easy now to see what is likely to come in from NMPC. So I think that was also factored in arriving at the huge amounts already provided, coming in by way of, from government independent revenue in the 2022 budget. Of course, we may not really see the full picture, but what's important is that at least government expects to get, something, from these agencies.
Well, when Kislo was talking about the cow agencies going to defend their budget, if you're expecting the budget to be reduced, what we often see is increase in what has been budgeted. So the defense does not really matter when it comes to reduction. What you get is increase. That was when we started hearing about budget padding and what have you. That is obvious because, of course, if you have carried out some research on that, it's covered. Look, in some cases, some agencies will go to defend their budget only to come back and have added some, against expected reduction, as the case may be. Well, we're taking a short break now. When we return, we will continue with the conversation. This is Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the NTA. Do stay with us.
I'm the Chief Resident Engineer and Project Supervisor of the Second Niger Bridge Project. The Second Niger Bridge Project is a project that has been conceived for a very long time, but it has finally come to life during this present administration. This project has a lot of socio-economic benefits, and it has impacted positively on the lives of the host communities, both in Anambra State and Delta State. The people are very happy. The host communities, they partnered with us because apart from the social benefits, indigenes are also employed on this project. We can see how their lives are being improved.
This message is from the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
Finally, the hero of Nigeria's democracy has arrived. He shall usher us into a new phase of development, peace, and prosperity. He is the father of the new Nigeria, His Excellency President Muhammadu Buhari. GCFR. Welcome to another season of giving Nigerians hope yet again. We are sure of a great future for both ourselves and generations yet unborn. We look forward to your leading us as a nation into our manifest destiny. Though the challenges against us as a people are many, we know that your leadership shall set us on the right path to our greatness. A new dawn beckons on us all, and having you as our president is a precursor to this. Thank you for believing in Nigeria. This message is from the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA.
Everybody knows the secret to good cooking is that special ingredient. The mothers know it, but does this new generation know it? Let's find out. Mothers, daughters, are you ready? Yes! Let the cooking begin.
Erisco tomato paste. Now we get home, now we get love, now we get children. We spice the world with a meal so great and so healthy. You know we've got your back. Oh, with Erisco, Rigico, Nagico.
Ladies and gentlemen, food is ready.
Food Erisco tomato. Tomato paste. Hi, tomato paste. Good food for the body. Yum yum.
Erisco Rigico and Nagico tomato paste is made by Erisco Foods Limited, feeding Africans with healthy foods.
Since coming into office in 2015, the Buhari administration has recorded unprecedented achievements in all sectors, especially in the provision of infrastructure, which is the key to economic growth. Never in the history of this country has any administration done so much with so little. I recall that when this administration came into office, the price of crude oil, which provides for 80% of Nigeria's budgetary revenues and 95% of foreign exchange earning, dropped drastically, thus reducing the amount of resources available to the federal government. In spite of this, the administration has continued apace with massive infrastructure development.
This message is from the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
We have come to the end of another successful year. We wish to appreciate all those who mean so much to us. Our clients, the 3 tiers of government: ministries, departments, and agencies, corporate bodies, advertisers, religious bodies, civil society groups, political parties. You are esteemed viewers. Together, we made 2021 great. Together, we shall make 2022 greater. Thank you. Wishing you a Merry Christmas and a prosperous New Year from all of us at NTA.
You're welcome back, and it's still Good Morning Nigeria, live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. Nia Kisujo, our guest, along with Professor Chue Waleke and Shuaibu Idris. The other guests are still with us on the today's conversation. Nia, I asked the question about the cash cow agencies, if you may, and what impact that has had. Did we, that's to say, if I say we now, our representatives, did they make any discoveries? As to say, oh yes, we had this suspicion, now these are the new discoveries, and if they made any such discoveries, do you see the impact on the bill that they have passed?
Yeah, I think they did. Specifically in their statement, they talked about increasing revenues expected from the cash cow agencies, as you described, by 400 billion naira. You know, and that's appreciable. Though we have not seen the breakdown, but the fact that they have that 500 billion naira addition from those MDAs shows that they were very clinical in their investigation, because they actually set up an investigation committee to look into the books of these people while they are also engaging them. So 400 billion, okay, but it could be better. I still believe that there are still a lot of avenues to boost whatever earnings are expected from the MDAs, especially the revenue generating MDAs. And perhaps even more than that is to also encourage them to also think global, global transparency too. The more these MDAs bring their books, their financials into the public space, the more expert analysts are able to also see opportunities, in those books and also advise them as it were. So being opaque is not exactly encouraging, and it's not exactly patriotic too. We've had a situation where we had the biggest cash cow of them, NNPC, priding itself in being opaque in its financials, and we did not see any improvement in the management and financial capabilities and capacity of that particular entity until it started, publishing and publicly circulating its financials, its papers. And it's based on that people saw what's happening and could also make suggestions, create advocacy around where they could improve their capacity and their revenue generation capabilities. So now we are seeing an NNPC, for instance, that is improving on its operating profits, talking about operating surpluses and all that, things that were very foreign, alien, to the NNPC books. We are seeing effort by SCBN also to also come into the public space. We are seeing more activities on the side of the NIT, I think that is being supported by government, to also engage the extractive industry, players in the extractive industry, to be more transparent. For the Nigerian administrator, and I'm not just talking about the federal level only, even through to the subnational, the issue of transparency is like anitma. It's seen as a sentiment of ambush. It's seen as a sentiment of putting your nose where it does not belong. But
and it's seen, if you may, let's chip in there. It's seen as an invasion of privilege.
Exactly. Of their own territory.
Of privilege. Who are you?
This is my turf. You have no business in my turf. And right. But unfortunately, the impact is erosional. It is when you bring what you are doing into the public space that you have the fools comment, and you give the opportunity of the wise to also comment. And the wise, by the time you balance it, there will be a huge difference, So I think what should drive our fiscal activities at the federal level, at the subnational level, should be the idea of transparency, so that people, even before decisions are made, people had opportunity to make their inputs, and the decision makers are also empowered, to be able to take from all this multitude of thoughts to create more stronger policies going forward.
All right, Shwabi Idris, let's bring you in here on this very issue of being transparent in our major agencies, especially, since we described with the cash cow agencies like NNPC, CBN, NAT, and others. Are you seeing?
No, Kirian. NAT is not a cash cow. NAT is the only government agency that has transparency in its name.
Because going by the name, yes, right. Transparency. Now, are you envisaging a situation where being transparent in all these big agencies will help in the fiscal balance?
Kirim, before I answer your question, let me just correct a wrong impression Professor Uche may have had. I do not think that I will want to see a budget forecasting or budgeting exchange rate to be at 500 naira. That will send wrong signal to the market. Number two, I think, Prof, you also got it wrong, because earlier part of the year, January, February, March, exchange rate naira to dollar official was somewhere around 330, 340. It was middle of the year that the central bank decided to merge the I&E window and what it calls the official exchange rate, which we had 405 naira. So these are facts and they can be cross-checked. Kingsley Kirian, if you remember, we had discussion on exchange rate here, and Professor Mike Obadan and co came on board, and we posited that there was need to correct the anomaly. And to God be the glory, Central Bank listened to some of those recommendations, and there was a merger of the rates. Now, to the question of cash cows and intrusion into their privacy, quote and unquote, Kingsley, again, if you remember, we discussed about TSE, the Treasury Single Account here, and the fact that 5 years down the line, when TSA was introduced, we still have government agencies, parastatals, not keen into TSA, and monies being sloshed into one account or another. I would have thought, and any right-thinking person would have thought also, that when the National Assembly prognosed into, and I use the word prognose in parentheses, into this cash cow account, and they came across those 200, 400, or 500 billion naira, what should have happened should be that the Auditor General of the Federal Republic of Nigeria should be questioned and, if possible, be punished. How on earth will that be happening, and the person occupying that position didn't find out those, anomalies? The directors of finance and indeed those chief executive of the agencies who hid those revenues from government should also have been queried and possibly punished. Gentlemen, during President Obasanjo's tenure, I think second term, Obasanjo was trying to balance the budget. Then NITEL was still in existence, and NITEL in its account was about 1 billion or 2 billion naira that was hidden somewhere, and that was the money the government used to balance the account. So there are agencies that have so much, and they are generating so much money, and the system is clear. There are agencies that are expected to generate and remit. Agencies like immigration, they are not expected to touch a single dime of whatever they generate. There are agencies that are allowed to generate, spend, and remit. There are other agencies that are allowed to just generate and spend because they are not expected to remit anything, like the universities. Now, if you have agencies that are mandated to generate and remit, or generate, spend, and remit, and they are still not rendering account or not submitting to the TSA, what are we talking about? The Accountant General of the Federation should wake up from his slumber and make sure that these agencies comply. Do you even need to wait for the National Assembly to call these agencies to come and defend their budget? And like Kirian, you alluded, should we be seeing an oversight function by the National Assembly to look at budget of these agencies simply to say, okay, go ahead, spend the money? We are still not being thrifty. We are still not being austere. We are still being so profligate. And I'm still, with my loud voice talking about the need to exercise some care and caution. If we have to pay our debts, if we must be responsible, we have to manage our spendings, we have to manage our expenditure. We have a budget that is 70% recurrent expenditure, 30% capital expenditure. And for the last 7-10 years, we've been talking about the need to rebalance this budget to make sure that more of our spending should go into capital. Are we seeing that? Finally, is the issue of allowing corporate Nigeria to handle certain projects. Only yesterday, there was a signing ceremony between the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation and Minister of Works to handle some roads. What is happening? Are we saying that the revenues accruing to the center will now reduce because such agreements will definitely mean the tax that should have gone into the Commonwealth of Nigeria will no longer go into Commonwealth of Nigeria. I think it is also important that I should introduce another dimension to the budget. The sectoral allocation appears to be a little bit lopsided. We have the NSA office getting 155 billion, the Ministry of Defense getting over 900 billion. Together is over a trillion naira. When you look at the budget for the health, education, and agriculture, how much is, can we really say we are serious given what is allocated to these ministries? Shouldn't we begin to have a rethink? Defense for whom? And are we getting value for our money? Are Nigerians being defended when every day we are either being kidnapped, maimed, killed, or attacked by Boko Haram? Only 3-4 days ago, my local government, Giwa local government, 52 people were killed. I mean, defense for whom? I think we should also address the sectoral allocation and the need for the National Assembly and the executive to make sure that future allocation should be done based on value for money and based on the needs for by Nigerians.
All right, Shuaibu Idris, thank you very much for your thoughts on this topic. Just before we wrap up, in a few minutes, if you like, I'm told by our director that this could be just about 60 seconds. The point has been touched on briefly. We have the appropriation bill passed by the House. We are waiting that of the Senate, and then if it's accented to by the President, then we have the Appropriation Act 2022. But already, Nigeria has indicated we are now in the fourth wave of coronavirus, and it's on account of Omicron. And we are seeing what is happening in the Western world. Netherlands into total lockdown, Germany restricting the inflow of travelers from the UK. Now, are we mindful of the external shocks that may arise from what has been projected to be a harsh winter of coronavirus for the Northern Hemisphere, where you have the world's leading economies? And if so, will all of these numbers continue to hold? Or we should get a more realistic attitude towards what 2022 will hold for us? Uche.
Kinsley, that's the point I made at the beginning of this program. I said, the new estimates that we have, revenue projections, don't appear to take into cognizance the risks that we, global economy, is likely to face in 2022. Which is why I still say that I didn't see the need to raise the oil price benchmark from $57 to $62. The other thing too has to do with the expenditure side itself. You see, before now, after the president made this, appropriation bill, laid it before the National Assembly, before now we've had all manner of conversations, around it, including the ones, especially by non-state actors, the NGOs. And these NGOs, have pointed out clearly that in the documents, there would appear to be, some duplications, some items that ordinarily ought not to be there. I wonder whether those were taken into cognizance by the National Assembly, when they merely returned everything apart from, increasing the estimates. And the Speaker of the National Assembly, made that point. The House of Reps made that point when he said that there was need to, rationalize agencies. There was need to even shut down some that, are no longer of value. So by doing so, I think going forward in future, I would like to see the recurrent, component of the budget, reduced considerably.
Neil, 15 seconds.
Oh, wow, okay. Well, I just want to make a brief response to Shuaib's in Lagos concern over the sectorial allocation. I think security is a major concern at this point in time. And if we are doing the 99 billion that he's talking about is even for recurrence. There's a need to recruit more, more soldiers, more police and all that. So you expect the recurrent arm to still go up. I'm even bothered with what is allocated to the capital, 204 billion. I think that's what will be used to acquire, arms and ammunition and all that. I think it's low, given the kind of challenges we are facing now.
But he talks about value for money.
Yeah, well, value for money. The truth also is that it's just recently that we are actually arming our arsenal. We've had issues of corruption, where how many generals have been placed under investigation and all that for diverting.
And on trial.
And on trial too, over time.
All right, 15 seconds will give you a grace.
Thank you for
additional grace. Gentlemen, we appreciate your being with us on Good Morning Nigeria. As always, a delight. Our roving financial and economic analyst, Shuaibu Idris, last time he was with us from Sokoto. Today, with us in Lagos. Deep thanks for your insights always on Good Morning Nigeria. We hope you enjoy your holidays. Also here with us in the studios, Professor Uche Waleke. Deep thanks also for being around. Niya Kinsiju, we appreciate you always as a guest on Good Morning Nigeria.
Well, and that's it for today's edition of the program Good Morning Nigeria. Well, we thank you for watching. Come back again tomorrow when we bring you a fresh edition of the morning show. My name is Kirian Umaya. Do have a pleasant day.
And I'm Kingsley Osadolo.